55th Annual ISNA Convention. In God we trust.
Assalamu alaikum again. It's now my distinct honor to celebrate with you a very important elected official, one that represents our community. She is a Palestinian. She is a firebrand who speaks truth to power. She is racially conscious. She is a mother. She is a truth teller. And she is a Muslim American. Her name is Rashida Tlaib. Please give her a round of applause. She is Michigan's newest House representative to Congress from the 13th District. And she is someone that makes us all hold our heads high in not only pride, but compassion to hopefully do right by the American people. Please join me in welcoming Rashida Tlaib to the stage.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm so honored to all be here with all of you, incredible Muslims from all over the country. I'm so proud to be not only a child of immigrants, but a young girl that grew up in a very predominantly, probably the blackest city in the world, Detroit. And not only that, I didn't speak English when I started school. I, was from parents that never graduated from high school, didn't end up going to college. I was the first in my family. But why I tell that story and why I want to try to have you look at this in such a very profound way, for me, mashallah, I didn't get elected by Arab or Palestinians or Muslim, but I got elected by predominantly African American and white community. And that speaks so much volumes of who we are as a country. And this been in a moment in our country where it's been dark. I know, sisters, you know what I mean. It's been very dark and stormy. And this is a moment of light that we should all be celebrating and taking joy in it. And alhamdulillah, as I walk onto the United States floor of Congress, I will not be alone. I will be with our sister Ilhan Omar from Minnesota. So this did not happen at just any particular time. This happened now. This happened now, and not only one, but two Muslimas are going to be able to serve in the Congress. One of the most impressive, just one of the most honorable positions you can have. And alhamdulillah, we were elected by people that didn't share the same faith, didn't share the same ethnicity, and we were still embraced. So take that, embrace it yourself, believe in the possibility of what we are as a country. And it is something, alhamdulillah, we should all feel as blessings over and over again. And I can't wait to vote for your daughters, your granddaughters. I know this is just the beginning. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum.
I will now be introducing our panel members from the illustrious Muslim American community. The first on stage is a man named Mujahid Fletcher, who runs Islam in Spanish. Our second panelist is Imam Zaid Shakir. Next is fellow Palestinian firebrand and activist, Linda Sarsour. The interviewer with the harder questions that I'm going to ask is Mehdi Hassan. And the researcher and speaker and thought-provoking thinker, Dalia Mogahad. For now, I'm going to now take my seat with them to start off our discussion. Can you guys hear me? Okay. It's just a lot less loud than the podium, so make sure that you guys can speak so that everyone can hear you. Thank you all for joining us today at the Unapologetically Muslim panel. We're really excited to have you, especially you, Mehdi. Yeah, you're just smiling. Why are you smiling?
I'm smiling.
You're smiling a little too
later.
much, okay? I'm gonna ask you a tough question.
Normally I have resting angry Muslim face, so
Yes.
it's good to someone to tell me that I'm smiling.
This is not the time to be angry.
Always angry, that's my face, that's the point.
You're like, what am I supposed to do, smile or be angry? Okay, so I wanna kick off first by asking a question that tries to deal with the history of America, and specifically other communities who have come to the United States who were once considered foreign and then became a lot more unapologetic in their particular stances or identities. And these were usually immigrant communities, so I thought of some examples like the Catholic or the people with Jewish ancestry or people who are Irish, for example, amongst others. What do you think we can learn from their example, and why is their example sometimes not instructive for Muslims? I'm going to direct that question first to Dalia.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you. I think that question's really important because I think that oftentimes we do look to these communities. When I say we, let me be clear. When I say we, I actually mean Muslims from like Arab and Desi backgrounds. So that's actually what I'm talking about right now. Immigrant, either they came as immigrants, children of immigrants. Immigrant communities look to other immigrant communities that they think maybe have done a good job of coming in and blending in, and think that we can kind of follow that path. And so what all of these folks that you just mentioned have in common is that they're white, right? So they came in, they were first Irish, and they were Italian, and they were Polish, and then they became white.
Yes.
And so there's, I think, a underlying, false assumption among many of us as Muslims that is the path to full American membership, and it absolutely is not. So the idea of aspirational whiteness is something we have to shed and really move away from. We are just not going to, that's not how we're going to become. We have to actually create, I think, a different path forward where the American Muslim community is the only faith community with no majority race. We're the most ethnically diverse faith community in America. We're going to chart this path forward in a way that maybe has not been done before. The other thing I want to emphasize is that a third of our community are African American, a third of our community are Black Muslims who had a completely different experience in how we all got to this moment. And so I think when I look at who we can learn from, I think we have to learn from our Black Muslim brothers and sisters, if I'm talking about the immigrant community. And the reason I say that is because the issues that brown Muslims are dealing with are ones that the Black community at large in America has been dealing with to a much greater extent for far longer. So I think there's a lot to learn from the legacy of the civil rights movement, and that continues today. And I'll finish with this. I think that one thing we get wrong is we look at a system that has a hierarchy of privilege, and we think, how can we just get to the top of that hierarchy? You know, that's success. But I really think we have to dig much deeper into our spiritual tradition and ask, how can we dismantle an unjust hierarchy, not how can we ascend it?
Thank you. So you bring up a good point, Dalia, which is that a third of our community is African American, Black American. And what I kind of want to better understand from Imam Zaid Checker here on the panel, is how can we better highlight that indigenous Muslim community and the Black experience? And if we're not doing enough to do that or to create a unified community, what are the concrete steps we can take to make that better?
I think number one, to acknowledge that there are different histories, that you're not going to replicate the experience of a community that's been here before the country was here and say that people who have come in the 70s, 80s, or 90s are going to replicate that history. It's not going to happen. I think it's a question of respecting those histories and then coming together along the lines that our religion requires from us, to come together along the lines of brotherhood and sisterhood, mutual support, coming together in ways that help to facilitate a more healthy exchange, just exchange of ideas, exchange of experiences, and supporting each other in our respective spaces. And that involves just living together, growing together, sharing, and really caring. I think you said, as you mentioned, maybe the communities upwards to 30% African American at this conference, maybe 1/3 of 1% are African Americans. So what's broken down, and how can we begin to think of ways to repair those breaks and those ruptures so that the community is represented in a gathering such as this, without tokenizing, without being patronizing, but being sincere brothers and sisters, and recognizing we have different historical experiences, but we're all Muslims, and as Muslims, there are certain things that our religion requires from us in terms of coming together and working along those lines to create the common spaces and go forward based on a shared experience.
Thank you. And both you, Imam Zaid and Dalia, have talked about the difficulty of potentially tokenizing or kind of like pigeonholing certain communities. My next question is really, it's to Mehdi. Can anyone really speak for the Muslim community at large? And if we stress diversity in terms of we don't have a monolithic identity, but we also need people to speak on behalf of our community. So can you talk a little bit about that tension, and how do you feel as one of those voices that is being held up in our community? And if you can tell us a little bit about the pressure you feel in having to represent so many people in your life.
It's a great question, and I think people who don't do what a lot of us on this stage do struggle with it a great deal, because right now we are in this debate now where people are talking much more about diversity, rightly so. Things have changed even since 9/11, radically. I remember I was a producer on 9/11. We were looking for Muslim voices on the British media. There weren't any. And now we've gone to a transition where we have voices and we're deciding who are the right voices. Are they reflective of the different communities? There's a debate about community versus communities. Is there a Muslim community, one monolithic, or are we talking about multiple communities? But, I think it's a double-edged sword. There's no right answer. On the one hand, clearly we do need more people on TV, in radio, in print journalism, giving our perspectives, pushing back against bigotry, giving a voice to the voiceless. On the other hand, no one person can do that or should try and do that. That's absurd to think any one person could reflect, even the people on this panel, could we reflect each other? But having said that, as you say, the reality is, right now, Muslim community in the United States, for example, are being demonized, are being treated as a monolith. I think Linda said in her speech last year at the ISNA luncheon, I remember you made the point, and I've said this as well, we rightly don't see ourselves as a monolith, but our opponents do.
Yes.
Right? They treat us as one homogenous block. So a lot of the issues that affect us, whether it's to do with our dress code, our politics, foreign policies that we don't like, the food that we eat, those are common issues, and we do need to be organizing around those issues both at a political level and a media level. But, at the end of the day, we can carp and complain about, is this right, is that the right balance? But you know what? When I see Linda on TV, when I see Dalia on TV, I'm cheering. And I think most people in this hall are cheering because finally we've got spokespersons who are eloquent, who know what they're talking about,
Yes.
who are intelligent, who aren't going to embarrass us. And that fundamentally is much more important than anything else. Because you know what? We're a community that's fundamentally right now fighting for your survival. And when you're fighting for your survival, I do believe the government poses an existential threat to Muslim communities. At that level, we need to get our stuff together and really work out what is our strategy. And yes, nobody's claiming to speak on behalf of all Muslims. I go on TV and I speak. I don't claim to be the ambassador from all Muslims. But then again, if I don't go on TV and I see someone else do it badly, I'm like, I should have done it. Exactly. So it is a dilemma. I don't think there's a right answer to solving that problem.
Yes, Imam Zaida, then.
Just very quickly, I think that one thing we do need to do, we need to organize ourselves so that we're in communication, and then collectively, those who are representing various strands within the community can say, listen, there's a situation, collectively we agree, Dalia Mujahid should be our spokeswoman to address the media on this particular issue. So whatever we do, we need to begin to organize ourselves into an NAAMP organization.
Yeah, I think we can all agree that we like kebabs and rice. I think we can all, go ahead, Linda.
I actually think it's a deficiency in our community that we don't have more Muslims that are on national television talking about the issues that impact us. But I just wanted to say, me personally, I don't care if you're Sunni, Shia, I don't care how you pray, if you pray, I don't care what you eat for dinner, I don't care where you went to school. If you are a Muslim who is eloquent and you're not going to embarrass me on national television, and that you are standing up for justice, that you are giving our community a powerful force, and you represent a majority sentiment on a particular issue in the Muslim community, by all means, I'm sitting in my house cheering for you too. TV is not for everybody. Speaking on behalf of the Muslim community isn't for everybody. And we just have to understand that we all have different roles to play. And if you're not a person who's going to be able to represent your community and go on national television and speak with eloquence and with clarity and with courage, please stay home and don't go
I will stay
on national
home.
television.
I'm going to stay home, Linda.
No, you should be on TV more.
But
one thing I would say is, sometimes I do think we exaggerate these differences. Of course, we have differences of opinion and backgrounds. Sure. But on the fundamental issues that matter to us, to our families' futures, to our security, I think I would be surprised if there wasn't a consensus on one of the threats that we face right now. And I would say one thing about watching Muslims on TV and diversity, the ones to watch out for, the ones who always start every statement with, speaking as a Muslim, and then they attack Muslims. We know those ones. They're the ones to watch out for.
Yes, well put. And really speaking of people who speak to national audiences, sometimes international audiences, I want to ask Mujahid this question. Specifically, I know that you are on Telemundo as well as CNN Spanish and other major news outlets that reach an incredible amount of people, millions of people, through your directorship of Islam in Spanish. Could you speak a little to the Spanish, what role the Spanish-speaking Muslim community is now playing, how fast it's growing, what part of that community is indigenous to Islam? How many generations did it take, for example, for us to even hear enough about Spanish-speaking Muslims?
MashaAllah. Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. First and foremost, it's a pleasure to be here sharing this panel because many of the people who speak the Spanish language often may feel marginalized because as you guys are speaking about English television, you're not watching the Spanish television.
Yes.
So because Latinos now are growing in Islam, and according to some statistics, is the largest ethnic group embracing Islam in America. Alhamdulillah, we opened up here in the city of Houston, Texas about 2.5 years ago, the Spanish-speaking Islamic Center, and we've seen 135 people embrace Islam.
Wow.
Within 2.5 years. Alhamdulillah. Anytime something happens with the Muslims, they contact us, the media contacts us, and they want a reaction statement within an hour. So that's about the amount of time that we have to be able to gather whatever information is available at that time. And for anyone who understands media, as events develop, you get updates of more and more of the facts or whatever has been reported. So as soon as something happens and we get 1 hour to respond, we have to be very strategic as to how we represent the Muslim community and not represent the Latino Muslims.
Yes.
We're not here to represent an ethnic group. We're here to represent Islam and Muslims. And when we look at Muslims,
Yes.
alhamdulillah, when we look at Muslims on CNN, for example, the first Muslim ban, there was a security specialist, former Marine, obviously Latino, speaking Spanish, and then there is an immigration lawyer, and the way that they titled the lower thirds of my name, right under my name, not only are they looking at Islam in Spanish, but they're seeing that we're almost like the voice of the Muslim community in that moment.
I see.
Because we happen to speak Spanish. So whenever we go into these discussions, we have to understand that it's a whole different demographic. Latinos are also being marginalized. They're suffering from immigration issues. They're being discriminated. So they share a lot of the sentiment we share. So whenever I speak on Telemundo, Univision, CNN in Spanish, they like to hear our voice because it's a voice of diversity for the same struggle.
I see. Beautiful.
Alhamdulillah.
I kind of want to ask you, Dalia, a little bit more about the unapologetic Muslim stance, so to speak. Being a community who's unapologetic means it's kind of rightfully using your words before that, I don't need to have an invitation, this is my house, right? That was a tweet that was viral that you tweeted. And I want to ask you a little bit about what is happening in terms of Muslim identity when we're talking about individuals who attend a mosque versus individuals who do not attend a mosque. And specifically, is being unapologetically Muslim, does it mean that you have to be a card-carrying mosque member per se? Or are we getting further and further away from that traditional Muslim attending mosque and having that space to celebrate their identity?
Yeah, thank you. Just to clarify, my tweet was a response to a tweet. So I had someone tweeted at me, "You're not welcome here." Well, that's like the most common thing you'll ever hear, right? And so I decided to actually respond to him publicly, and I said, I'm not waiting for your welcome. This is my house. And people like that tweet. So
yeah. It's a great tweet.
So I actually think there's a huge difference between being unapologetically Muslim and being a practicing Muslim.
Okay.
Right? And there's an overlap, there's a huge overlap, but actually you can be a practicing Muslim and not be unapologetic. And you can definitely be unapologetically Muslim and, struggle to get to the mosque for Eid even,
yes,
let alone Friday. So there's sort of two different things. And I think and they're both important. They're both incredibly important. I hope that we can all be in that overlap, in that Venn diagram, where we are spiritually engaged, we are psychologically engaged with Islam, we love our community, and we have confidence. We just walk around like we own the place, and it's because we do. We have a stake in our country. We are not guests, and that's what it means to be unapologetically Muslim. It's simple. It's a simple thing. And what it means is to look around at our fellow citizens and to see equals. Whether they see us as equals or not, we see equals. We don't see overlords to appease, and we don't see enemies to conquer. We see equal human beings, even people who hate us. We see equal human beings. We see their humanity, even if we deeply disagree with them and even dislike them. So I think being unapologetically Muslim, for me personally, I get the strength to be able to show up in the world having compassion even when I totally disagree with you from my spiritual resources. Some people, they show up in the world being 100% unapologetically Muslim, but they've got some real questions, spiritually about their faith. And that's a different discussion and one we should have, but I actually see the two as quite distinct.
Okay.
45% we were talking about the statistic, 45% of Muslims say they attend a mosque weekly. And that's probably a lot higher than you might imagine. That's what like every single poll has ever shown. It's really a pretty robust number that keeps repeating that I now just believe it. You know, whether it's Pew or Gallup or ISPU or several other, you know, informal, 45% always come out. That number is like very repeatable. So the majority of us aren't going to a mosque once a week, one, but the idea that mosques are so irrelevant, we should just not even talk about them, they're totally, you know, passé, they're so 1980, that's not true. Mosques still really matter. They matter, and that's why we have to get them right. We have to make them places where we can go and actually gain strength, become stronger, more engaged, more feel like we belong, even if we don't feel like we fit in.
Thank you.
Just on, can I jump in very quickly?
Yeah, Mehdi.
Just on the line that Dalia made about confidence, I think that's absolutely key. Because if we're not confident in ourselves, then how can we expect other people to have confidence in us when we're making our case or making our argument? And we live in a country right now, the United States of America, you know, our opponents don't lack for confidence. They don't apologize for anything.
Right.
You have a guy in the White House who's never apologized for anything in his life. Right? You have a guy in the White House whose only qualification for the job was that he presented a TV program and he had a cameo in Home Alone 2, right? And he's the most powerful man in the world.
A reality
in
TV
control
program.
of nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
He didn't get there by, you know, demurring, deferring, apologizing. Now, I'm not saying we should copy the example of a mad narcissist, but I am saying that this applies not just to Muslims, this applies to all minority groups. The majority have not spent their lives apologizing, so I don't see why the minority should do. We should kind of emulate that behavior, that confidence that Dalia referred to, of treating everyone like equals. We're not lesser than you, we're not better than you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can I say something?
Yes, absolutely.
I think also in terms of how do you cultivate that sense of confidence, I think it's very important for all Muslims to recognize our respective histories, and particularly the history of African Muslims, because Pedro Quilafo was in present-day Mexico in the 1540s when he was boiled to death in a pot of oil for making dawah to the indigenous people here. Ayub bin Suleiman was here in the 1730s when America was still the British colonies. Ibrahim Abdurrahman was here 1790 to 1827 when the country was in its infancy. And you can go right up to the present day. So if we're saying, listen, I don't know what you're talking about, you know, you're still speaking with a Schwarzenegger-like accent. My people were here since the 1500s.
Yeah.
And so we were here before the country was the country. And so, and they paid the price with their blood, sweat, and tears for us to practice whatever religion we choose to practice. And so I think we have to own that history. And we own that history. We don't see, it's impossible to see yourself as being illegitimate.
Yes. And so Imam Zaid, do you want to speak, Ojad? Tell me. No, follow up. Sure. And then I'll go back.
Just wanted to mention that part of the history, when alhamdulillah I had the opportunity to travel to Spain, to Andalusia.
Yes.
With Dr. Abdullah Hakim Quick, who is a historian, has gone over, 62 different countries in the world, but knows the in-depth of some history. And while we traveled in places like Cordoba, in Granada, we found that from 711 to 1492, 781 years, you have Muslims governing Spain. And it was only until 1975 when Franco stopped being the leader there that people were able to again practice Islam. 1975 until now. It took 24 years to get a permit to begin building a mosque in Granada again. But even though they have this delay of time, even though they own land, and the majority of the cathedrals in Granada were mosque. You know, when you have a neighborhood with 5 cathedrals, I used to be a Catholic. You don't need to have 5 churches in a neighborhood, because if you're the most practicing Catholic, you're going once a week.
Yeah.
But as we know, in many parts of the Middle East, there's masajid all over. So these were masajid. And if we look at historically, Spain having Islam and the Muslims governing Spain, it's part of the West. So the way I look at my heritage, Islam is indigenous to the West.
Okay.
And I represent a lost heritage that we were not told about. And when we reconnect is why you're getting so many people coming into Islam.
Absolutely. So, Imam Zaid, I had a question about young Muslims. And specifically, we heard from Daddy the statistic about 45% of those who've answered polls, Muslim Americans, are regular mosque-attending Muslims. The other, 55% are basically not there. When we're talking about young Muslims and the future of Islam in America, where do you think young Muslims are going to celebrate their identity or to seek Islamic knowledge? And if it's not the mosque, where is it? And do you feel that young people who come and talk to you, for example, do they still feel like they need to explain Islam to others, that they're representing the faith, that they have to explain it to other people? And does this pressure them to turn away from traditional organized institutions of learning, for example?
First of all, I think that young Muslims are just as diverse as old Muslims. They're not a monolithic group. Some of them are very much attached to the masjid, some of them aren't. Some of them are seeking knowledge in places as diverse as Tarim in Yemen, or formerly in Syria, currently in Egypt, Morocco, places that are still stable, Pakistan, Karachi, Taqi Osman's Dar Ulum outside of Karachi, and different places in the Muslim world. Some of them are studying with their local imam. Some of them aren't studying at all. But I think that what they all share is deep down inside, there's a desire to be a Muslim. So they might not be what we might consider, many of them, some of them, the best Muslims based on the stereotypical understanding of what a good Muslim might be. But that desire to be a Muslim is there. And when push comes to shove, they will stand up, and they do stand up to represent the religion. So it's a mixed bag.
Okay.
Just to actually add to that, in our research at ISPU, we found that when you look at young people in the Muslim community in America, they're unique, or they're different from their age peers in the general public in that they are as likely as their elders to say religion is important to them. So young people in the general public are far less likely, like half as likely as their elders to say that they feel like religion's important in their lives. But when you look at the Muslim side, all of the age groups are the same. In fact, young people sometimes are slightly higher than their elders in saying religion is an important part of their lives. But despite that, they're actually less likely to attend a mosque on a regular basis. So even when you don't see young people at the mosque as much as older folks, it's not a reflection of how important Islam is in their lives. There are other obstacles keeping them from the mosque.
Thank you. That's really important to know. So, Linda, you're pretty active on social media. Would you agree? I'm sorry? I'm sorry, could you speak into your mic? Linda?
Yes.
Great. Because I think you were checking Twitter here. I think that's what you were doing.
Got to keep your pulse on the conversation.
Yeah, I'm just going to keep it 100 with you. So I just want to, I want to know from your experience kind of being active on social media. I see, personally, I'm not as active as you as social media, but I'm a little bit active. And I see a lot of young Muslims speaking to each other and saying things like, don't judge. Like, whatever you do not judge. And so what I want to ask you is, when you hear or experience the people that are interacting with you on social media, are you seeing that judgment is something that they actually fear? And is it, and are we entering an era of moral relativism in some ways, or does that fear actually keep people from being unapologetically Muslim or celebrating their identity in an American Muslim space?
Social media is a very interesting place. like, for example, I got back on Twitter today after like 3 weeks of not being on Twitter, just to give the haters a little break. You know, sometimes the racists need breaks. They
Yeah,
work
I know.
hard.
They need to also rest
work
on
hard.
Sundays.
I see their humanity, and I want to just give them a break from me for a little bit. I think social media is an interesting place for Muslims and young Muslims in particular. You know, social media is corrupt in its own way and can corrupt you really in a really bad way.
Okay.
Or it could really be a place where you can thrive and learn and interact with people you wouldn't normally otherwise have access to. I've met a lot of great people on Twitter that eventually I end up meeting in real life. I have organized campaigns solely on people that I've just met in the digital space. Okay. So there's a lot of product that comes out of social media. I think a lot of Muslims, do things that, and I'm, to your point, and I'm, about the judging part, there are a lot of Muslims that I see, and young Muslims, they do this thing, like the whole American flag hijab thing. I don't quite understand that very much. I don't know what I don't know what the message is the message that we wear an American flag hijab because we're so American that even our flag we can even wear a flag as a hijab.
Yeah.
So sometimes I wonder if that is because people are trying to portray that we are so American and use social media to be like, look, I'm an American too, and do certain things. I don't know. And that is why I'm not judgmental on social media, because I don't want to interpret that space, because you can't tell much from one tweet.
Yeah.
You can't judge somebody from one photo or from one action. So I do caution Muslims in the way in which they use social media, and who they follow on social media, and what they pick up from people on social media. Social media is to be taken with a grain of salt. I've chosen to use social media to share work and to show people what is possible, what we are capable of, and to also show people that I practice what I preach. And I think that's important. We have a lot of time, oftentimes in many communities, there are leaders who will tell you, do this, say that, and they don't actually do it themselves. And so I try to also give our community updates. When I feel like there's information, my role on social media is to take complicated matters like a Supreme Court decision around the Muslim ban, or a particular case that's we're working on, or a campaign, and try to give our community relevant language, or language that is accessible to them, because not everybody in our community has a master's degree. Not everyone in our community, English is their first language. Not everyone in our community is engaged in politics at the level of, as many of us are. So social media, I am never the person that's going to tell you social media is the most amazing place. It's a useful place if you know how to use it and are using it for good. And then if you're not using it for good, then that's a problem.
Gotcha. Mehdi.
Social media, if you're a journalist or an activist, it's invaluable. If you're married, it can be dangerous.
Yes,
Yeah,
we know
my wife is
that.
very upset with me that I'm always online, not in the real world. It can be addictive. I'm probably addicted. Actually, I think to myself, I'm so glad there wasn't social media when I was a kid, because I don't know what I would have done. I can barely handle it now. What would I have done as a teenager? I think the evidence is in, unfortunately. All the studies and surveys from doctors, scientists, people looked at it. It's bad for you, right? There's literally no debate about that. It harms your real-life friendships. It harms your attention spans. It harms your behavior. And I think the behavior thing is key for Muslims. We're talking about being unapologetically Muslim, but how do you behave as a Muslim in the public space is an important conversation to have. And social media, unfortunately, unleashes in all of us, and I include myself in this, some of our worst traits and worst personalities. We say and do things on Twitter or Facebook that we would never say in real life.
Yeah.
And that is a problem I have right now. You look at some of the debate around Islam and theology and just basic beliefs, horrifically done on social media. You look at the debate around Syria or foreign policy, can't be done. I refuse to tweet about Syria. It's impossible, because it's not a place for any kind of nuance or complexity. It's just people jumping into their tribes. Everything's black and white, everything's abusive. It's a real problem. And I think, Muslim communities in particular, who have so many issues going on, can't be sucked into that world. I mean, I give one example. I'm sorry to pick on liberal Muslims are as bad as conservative Muslims, but my example is of a conservative Muslim. Noura Erakat, who some of you may know, is one of the most eloquent voices on international law, human rights, and the issue of Palestine in the US media right now. She went viral during all the sniper shootings. Mm-hmm. And I remember everyone was sharing her videos. This is an amazing video. Everyone just went viral. One guy had tweeted, he's like, this would have been a better video if the sister had covered her head.
Oh.
It's like, really? That's your response? There's people being gunned down in Gaza. There are no voices on CNN speaking out against that. Noura is, and that's your response. You know, it's one response, but I'm just saying, that person would never say that in real life to Noura's face. And I think the problem is, it brings out some of our worst qualities, and we really have to rein that in. I've said at an earlier talk today, you know, social media can be a tool for activism. It's very powerful. But Linda made a very good point. How will you use it? And that requires discussion, debate. It requires teaching people. We need to have like workshops at places like this about how best to use social media. Because I wouldn't just, and I've got 2 kids. There's no way I'm going to let them spend even 1/10 of the time that I spend online. You know, they say, you know, do as I say, not as I do, sorry.
I actually think we really need to talk about the adab of social media. It's actually a spiritual question in many cases. I'm going to tell you honestly that this idea about don't judge, it's an interesting idea because there's sort of like there's 2 choices. Either you quote unquote don't judge or you condemn. And what don't judge ends up meaning is don't care. Okay, my friend is heading down this really self-destructive path and I'm just going to not judge. So I'm just going to let them do whatever they are doing and not even ask them about it, not even take them aside and say, hey, is something going on? So is there problems at home? Because I'm not going to judge. That is not healthy, right? But social media is not the right vehicle for giving a nasiha. We don't even know what nasiha means. We think don't judge means don't care. If your best friend or if your sister or your son or whoever is self-destructing, and you just let them, leave them alone, don't do anything, don't even talk to them about it because of this don't judge culture, that's not being a good friend. But commenting on their Instagram that you think they have too much makeup on is not how you deploy a nasiha. So we have completely lost the adab of advising each other, and social media has just amplified that problem.
Yes.
Yeah, great.
Yes. Could you please not look at my Instagram feed?
I won't.
Just
don't worry.
I don't want you to judge me, because you will. I want to ask, actually, Mehdi this question, which is, from your perspective, can you share what you think are some of the social or political stances that Muslims continue to take who are still apologetic about their identity?
Okay, interesting.
So yeah, I want to talk about people who are apologetically Muslim.
So do you mean like specifically on the issue, for example, terrorism is a classic one?
That's a good one, or anything else, sir.
That's a classic.
Palestine.
It's a debate about, condemning terrorism, for example, is a classic one. What do you do when there's a terrorist attack? Do you condemn or not? To condemn or not to condemn?
That is the question.
Condemn-a-thon. And there was a time, and Muslim communities in different parts of the world have gone through different phases. There have been phases where you've gone out there as quick as you can. Muslim organizations like ISNA Care have held a press conference, say, this is not in our name. These people are not speaking for Islam. And then there's, some would argue, younger, maybe more activist Muslims who say, no, this has got, to take Dalia's line about this is my home. This is not my people. These are people who have nothing to do with me. I've never met them. They live miles away often, if you talk about the other side of the world. What the hell has it got to do with me? And you don't apologize for what your quote-unquote group does. So, I see the advantages of both strategies. Sometimes you have to try different ways. I obviously lean to the second camp, but then I'm not a politician or a community leader, so I don't have the same responsibilities. I understand certain people are in more pressured positions. I would say one thing when we talk about apologetic, non-apologetic. We saw Rashida speak earlier today. She's already getting attacked by some people for her positions in our community already, right? When she becomes a member of Congress, there's going to be way more things that you and I in this hall disagree with her on. But that's fine. We can disagree. Yeah. We've got to the stage now where we think there's only one way of doing something. There's only one way of responding to a terrorist attack. There's only one way of campaigning on Palestine. There's only one way of solving the Syrian war. There's only one, and maybe there is, but the point is human beings will take different positions. And to come back to the social media line, that brings out the worst side of us, this black and white approach. I say something, you disagree with me. Rather than engage with me with adab or without adab, it's you're dead to me, I'm takfiring you, you're not a Muslim, you're a sellout, whatever it is. And people like me, I always joke, I've been called a Wahhabi because I work for Al Jazeera, Qatar. I've been called a Safavid because I'm Shia, so I must be Iranian.
Interesting.
I've been called a Zionist because I have Israelis on my show. So somebody joked recently that my Twitter bio should say Mehdi Hassan, Wahhabi Zionist Safavid, because I'm all of the above. And that's the problem right now. If you don't have any kind of
That's a complex identity.
this ability of being able to talk about things, disagree on issues, and even if I think you're being too apologetic, there's a way to deal with it without kind of throwing you under the bus or casting you out. And sometimes issues are complicated. They require different strategies. We will need Muslim members of Congress taking a position on legislation. And we will need Linda in the corridors of Congress, maybe being pulled out by Capitol Police.
Yeah, getting arrested.
We need different approaches, right? There's not one way towards the promised land. Insider, outsider, for example, which our community struggles with.
Go ahead, Linda.
Absolutely, I agree 100%. So just to make a clarification, I think that we have different strategies on social and political issues 100%. But there are some fundamental issues that it's not about the strategy, it's about what we have to believe about those issues that we got to get straight in the Muslim community. Palestine is a non-negotiable issue for Muslims. I don't care what kind of Muslim you are, Latino, African American, Somali, Yemeni. And the reason why I say that about Palestine is not just because I'm a Palestinian, it's because in comparison to a lot of the oppression that happens to Muslims around the world at the hands of oftentimes Muslim dictatorships, when it comes to Palestine, you as an American Muslim are complicit in the occupation of Palestinian, in the murder of Palestinian protesters. So when we start debating in the Muslim community about Palestine, it tells me a lot about you and about the type of faith that you have in your heart. Palestine is a human rights and social justice issue. It is an American issue because your taxpayer dollars are used. So whether or not you think the electoral process is the way in which to help solve the Palestinian issue, maybe you think it's other ways, protesting, online campaigns, humanitarian. The strategy's fine, and we're all going to be on different sides of the strategy. But in my opinion, on an issue like Palestine, you got to choose the side of the oppressed. And if you're on the side of the oppressor, or you're defending the oppressor, or you're actually trying to humanize the oppressor, then that's a problem, sisters and brothers, and we got to be able to say that is not the position of the Muslim American community. On the issue, for example, of police brutality or the killing of unarmed Black and Latinos, mostly, some of whom are from our community, there isn't, in my opinion, an opportunity for us to try to have a conversation about where Muslims want to sit here and use their time to defend law enforcement agencies who have police unions and apparatus and PR firms, but then you don't have the same time to defend the actual person and the family who have just lost their lives at the hands of law enforcement. I don't want to get into debates with Muslims about what Mike Brown did before he got shot. What did this young Black person do before he got shot? That's not a conversation any Muslim should be having. Your role as an American Muslim on social issues is to be on the side of the most marginalized, of the most oppressed, of those with the least resources that may not be able to defend themselves. And that's my thing in the Muslim community. You may want to defend a person who lost their life to police violence by doing litigation and suing the police department. Other people want to protest. Other people want to raise money. Do something. But if you're spending your time defending police officers against those who have been losing their lives or have been stopped and frisked or have been feeling discriminated at the hands of law enforcement, that's a problem. And again, that is not to say that every law enforcement agent in the country is a bad person. I'm talking about the system of law enforcement in America. So for me, there's fundamental things that we have to agree on. Health care for all people in the United States of America. We shouldn't be having a debate about health care. I have debates with Muslims all the time about reproductive rights, about a woman's right to choose in America what she wants to do with her body. This is not a religious debate I'm trying to have with imams. It's about whether you think that white men in government should be deciding what Muslim women or any woman do with their bodies. Maybe next year they're going to decide whether I wear a hijab or not, and I want to see what Muslims are going to say about that now. So my frustration with the American Muslim community is we debate about the strategy. I don't care what you do, just do something. but there are certain times where we gotta all be on the same page. And we as a Muslim community are not on the same page. I spend more time fighting Muslims about social justice issues than I do. I don't debate white supremacists. I don't go on Fox television. Why? Because I got enough of those in our community that I have to debate and get straight on the issue. So just ask yourself this question of when there is an issue, are you acting like Donald Trump? Are you saying, but there are nice people on both sides of this issue? That's how I know who you are, what you are, and how deep your faith is. Imam Zaid Shakir said something yesterday at a panel that we were doing together for a minna. And I want to be very clear because people also judge me and my approach. Everybody here has a different approach. We do different things. I'm angry. Anger moves me. And I am outraged at injustice. And if you're not angry, don't ask me why I'm angry. I want to know why you're not angry. The question for me is that I don't hate Donald Trump. I don't hate Islamophobes. I don't hate people who are in my opposition. I hate what they say. I hate what they do. I hate the actions of this administration. And you have to be moved to stand up and be unapologetically Muslim. I'm going to trademark that because I'm the one that got everybody in our community saying that. But just because you're saying it doesn't mean you mean what I mean when I say unapologetically Muslim. Unapologetically Muslim means that you are a whole human being and that you get to practice your faith freely in these United States of America, that you define Islam, that you define what Sharia is, that you define words like jihad and words like radical that are being used against us every single day in the Muslim American community, and that you stand proudly and that you understand that you are as worthy as a Christian, as a Jewish person, as an atheist, as a Hindu, as a Sikh, that we all have the right to be who we are in these United States of America, and that we have a right to frame our identity and not always have to answer in the frame that has been provided for all of you. When I go on national television, what it means to be an unapologetic Muslim is for me to say, no, I will not condemn terrorism as a Muslim. I condemn terrorism as a human being. I don't have to answer the questions that are provided to me. I say what I want, when I want, because I live in the land of democracy and I am allowed to say what I want to say in this country. So if you are not saying something, if you are not saying what you truly believe in your heart as a Muslim, and you are not standing up against injustice because you are worrying about what Islamophobes have to say, or Muslim reformers have to say, or because you care about you're going to get your picture on Fox television, or because you're not going to get a job at a university or get accepted into a university, then that's your problem, sisters and brothers, and that is not what it means to be an unapologetic Muslim.
You're bringing that fire. I had to drop it for you. Is that what you're doing on Twitter all day? I don't have a Twitter account. Dang, I need one. I need one now. Follow at Linda Sarsour, everyone. Okay, I'm going to go back to being a host and less of a fangirl. But I am a fangirl. I want to ask you, Imam Zaid, kind of what advice, since you are someone who gives a lot of wisdom to people like, nobodies like myself, but also to people who are sitting up here on stage. What would you tell someone who is really struggling to be proud to admit to people that they're Muslim or say that they're Muslim, especially if they're not outwardly representing Islam or maybe their faith, when they're afraid to come out maybe to their coworkers or to their peers who don't share their faith, whether that be because they're having a spiritual crisis or because they are genuinely embarrassed or humiliated by some of the actors that do things in the name of our religion. What would you tell someone who's really struggling to be unapologetically Muslim, or even maybe Muslim?
I would tell them to be like Linda, in the sense, no, which doesn't mean that you have to be, yeah. But you have
It's got called, yeah.
But you have to be free. This is all Linda is. She's saying, I am a free lady. I'm free.
Yes.
And we have to be free. And once we're free, the details in terms of how we express that freedom will vary from person to person because all of our experiences and situations vary. But when it comes time to speak, we'll speak as free human beings. When it comes time to determine which neighborhood we're going to live in, we're going to choose it based on the fact that we're free human beings and we have a right to live wherever we want to live. We have a right to say whatever we responsibly want to say. We have a right to go wherever we responsibly want to go. And if we have a right to work wherever our qualifications qualify us to work, and if someone has a problem with any of that, it's their problem, not our problem.
Beautiful.
You know, when I embraced Islam, I was 23 years old. And what I found in Islam was a just way of life. And that's what I was looking for all my life. And whenever I engaged the Muslim community, I was a bit confused because of what I saw. I thought everybody was a Sahaba in the Muslim community.
Oh.
You know, and I'm like, I'm reading this book. They have the same book. I don't understand what's happening.
Oh.
And this is 3 months before September 11th.
Yeah.
So whenever September 11th hit, I saw Muslims, in my perception as a new Muslim, they were running away from Islam and I was running towards Islam. You know, I saw women taking off the hijab, men cutting their beards off. And I was 3 months in Islam. And the Muslim community here in Houston, at that time, maybe 150,000, they didn't have anyone to speak in front of the media in Spanish. And so they asked a 3-month-old Muslim to do that. I stood up for that challenge, and they didn't even know what I was saying because they don't speak that language, right?
Yeah.
So they couldn't even tell me if it was right or wrong. So being in the depth of isolation, trying to do something right, I figured Muslims are weak when it comes to telling their story, so I'm going to have to do something about it. And I enrolled at the Art Institute of Houston and became a multimedia and film producer. I studied media in order to understand how to engage the public.
Yes.
Because as Muslims, we have the ability to look at the gaps and holes we have in our community, and instead of dwelling on the deficiencies, we can go and fill some of those holes if we utilize our time and resources properly.
Yes.
The issue is when people become apologetic, you'll find that they are stagnant regarding their own personal growth, let alone their compass in regards to how they want to utilize their time in serving this beautiful deen of Islam. And so after studying media and speaking in front of the media, now in a more engaging manner, understanding the production element of media, we have a production studio at our center. You know, when the Harvey hurricane hit Houston, Texas, alhamdulillah, several organizations, 50 different Islamic organizations, we teamed up and we utilized our facility to connect with ARY out of Pakistan. They gave 3 hours worth of airtime for the Muslim community in Canada and North America and the United States to raise funds for the Harvey victims. And in 3 hours, we had the mayor come as well. In 3 hours, we raised $1.6 million. Alhamdulillah. When the mayor came and, you know, possibly was thinking it was going to be a few 100,000, but mashallah, being at that level, he matched dollar per dollar. Wow. So it was $3.2 million that we as a Muslim community empowered the city. Vice just came out 2 weeks ago. They're, you know, Vice, they have so many series. They're doing a series called Minority Report. So they were following us for 5 days in our Eid right now at our center. So inshallah, soon in September, there will come out Minority Report. We're the 4th episode in a series.
Look out for it, guys. Vice, episode 4, Minority Report.
So what happens is this. We can look at our situation as victims, or we can look at our situations as victors. And history is written by those that were victorious.
Yes.
And it is
very good point.
It is very unfortunate that we spend the majority of the time talking about who we're not, instead of taking that time to say who we are. And if we specify who we are, not only would America, but the rest of the world see that we're an asset instead of a liability. But we have to do that work individually in whatever role we may be able to play.
And thank you for your work.
Mujahid mentioned something that's relevant to the question you asked me, and that is, I think a lot of times Muslims assume that no one really wants to hear what we have to say. They think we're a bunch of terrorists and who cares? But you'd be surprised. I mean, the reigning paradigm is not working. We have an opioid crisis, we have a suicide crisis, we have an alcohol crisis. Something's wrong. And you'd be surprised how many people will absolutely appreciate what a Muslim has to say and what a Muslim has to offer. And I'm not talking about marginalized communities. I think the last 5, 6 people I've given shahada to were all white American males. And so people want to hear solutions. And Islam is a solution that's been around for a long time. Islam saved my life. If I don't think I'd be alive today, I'd be at a place where a lot of my friends that I went to high school with, we played football with, ran track with, most of them are dead. Most of them are long dead. And they were dead, they died in ways that aren't necessarily laudable in the eyes of most people. And I would be with them in all likelihood were it not for Islam. And so Islam saved my life. And I don't think I'm so extraordinary or exceptional that what saved my life could not save the life of a whole lot of other people out there if they knew about it.
Beautiful.
One thing I was going to say about the unapologetic Muslim stance here in the United States, I'm from the UK, right? In Britain, we don't have anyone like Muhammad Ali. Right? You guys have Muhammad Ali. You want to talk about unapologetic Muslim. Yeah. You don't need to go searching. We're looking for a definition. Yeah, this is a guy who was the most proud of his faith, didn't take BS from anyone, whether it was interviewers, academics, scholars, hugely influential figure in history. In fact, so proud of his Muslim name that he devoted an entire fight in 1967 with Ernie Terrell to saying, "What's my name?" because Terrell had called him Cassius Clay. Yeah. Said, "What's my name?" Say Ali. So when you have someone like that, we talk about role models.
Yes.
Take advantage of that as American Muslims. When we look around defining in this discussion what is an unapologetic Muslim, I mean, Linda's answer should be copyrighted, I agree. But one thing I want to say before we finish, we've all said versions of what an unapologetic Muslim is. I just want to say something I think that it's not. Let's just be careful.
Okay.
An unapologetic Muslim is not a Muslim who's in denial. But let's not get carried away where we say, Linda rightly talks about being confident in the face of oppressors and bigots. That doesn't mean that you're saying, my community's perfect, we're all amazing, Islam's the best, screw all of you, or whatever the phrase you want to use. Right. I think that, and Dalia said it right at the beginning, you're not better than others, you're not worse than others. We do have lots of issues in our community. It would be madness to suggest that not being apologetic about Islam in the public space means that you're in denial about what's happening in your own backyard. There's lots of issues we have to deal with in our community. Yes. We all know that. The Muslims could be doing a lot more. Linda mentioned healthcare. From social, political, moral issues that need to be dealt with. We all know, everyone on this panel knows, everyone in this audience knows that there are massive deficiencies in our communities. We should be doing much more. So I just want to we need to strike that balance somewhere in this discussion between being unapologetically Muslim, which is about standing up to oppressors and declaring your self-dignity and equal value and self-respect, but also saying, wow, we have a lot of problems in our community that we're either not dealing with or in denial about or brushing under the carpet. And I get it. Islamophobia makes it very hard for us to discuss problems in our community. Yeah. We're always defensive. Yeah. We don't want to give any ammunition to Islamophobes. Years ago, I wrote an article about anti-Semitism in the Muslim community. Yeah. I said we're way too anti-Semitic in our attitudes towards Jewish figures. That has been thrown in my face for 5 years. You go on the most right-wing websites, they'll say, even Muslim journalist Mehdi Hassan said Muslims are all anti-Semites. Yeah. So it's difficult. You think, well, maybe I shouldn't have written that. You're always torn. How self-critical can you be when every line is being passed? It's going to be used against you by an Islamophobe, by a so-called Muslim reformer, by whatever. But that doesn't mean you don't have those conversations. You still have to be able to have those conversations. It's tricky, it's hard, but we can't run away with it on the grounds that, it's a form of apology, it's a form of self-denial. We have to strike that balance. We have to walk and chew gum.
Yeah, Dalia. Go ahead, Dalia.
I actually think being unapologetically Muslim means embracing our full humanity. I think it has to mean the whole thing,
Yeah.
warts and all, as you
Yeah.
said. It means allowing ourselves our full humanity. Toni Morrison has this amazing quote about the goal of bigotry. The goal of racism is to keep you constantly distracted trying to prove your humanity. Being unapologetically Muslim means, yeah, I'm human, and yes, I have problems in my community because I am guilty of being human. When we try to posture as being something other than that, other than human, it is actually a form of apology. I think being self-critical is a condition of being unapologetically Muslim.
Part and parcel of our humanity is to make mistakes and to admit them.
And to be allowed to make mistakes.
Yes.
To be allowed to make mistakes. When we make a mistake, it is magnified. And then the rest of us are so mad at that person. You're like, you did this, now we're all gonna be, And it's like, wait a minute, so did all these other people. But it's this idea, we're not allowed, we don't have a margin of error. We're not allowed. We have to walk on eggshells. We have to be perfect. It's like, it's something that so many other marginalized communities have to deal with. You have to be perfect just to be barely tolerated. And we have to challenge that.
Yeah, I think you're perfect. Okay, go ahead, Linda. I'm just kidding.
For the record, I am a proud, unapologetic, flawed Muslim. So just in case that's not clear to people. And I think all of us have those flaws, and I think it's important that you both brought that up. So I have a PSA because ISNA only gave me one main stage. So
let's do
gotta
this.
say what I gotta say.
Let's do this.
Like I said earlier, you just gotta say what you gotta say when you have the time to say it. To the unapologetic Muslims at ISNA, I have some instructions for you. It is very important this year, and please don't debate me on this. I don't want to hear any debates. We didn't even allow them to have a panel about it because no more debates for me in the Muslim community about this. 2018, November 6th. I'm not asking you to stand at a protest with 10,000 people. I'm not asking you to get arrested in civil disobedience. I'm not asking you to do anything except take yourself, your mother, your father, your uncle, your grandkids, whoever you have access to the polls.
Yes.
Sisters and brothers.
Yes.
Unapologetic Muslims are also politically powerful. So if you are a true unapologetic Muslim and you care about your legacy and history in this country and also about the future that we are building for our children and grandchildren, I need you to go to the polls in November. I need you to understand that in order for us to do the work that we do, to repeal the Muslim ban, to get access to health care, to pass just legislations, which could stop hemorrhaging on our community and at least slow down the rollback of our rights, I need you to get to the polls and vote for people that I can talk to, that I can have a conversation with, because right now, we got no power anywhere, not in the White House, not in the judicial branch, and definitely not in the House and in the Senate. We have a table outside in the lobby, outside of the bazaar. I need everybody at ISNA to go to that table. It's called Empower Change. I can check your voter registration because I got a lot of Muslims that tell me, Sister Linda, I'm registered to vote. I registered 28 years ago. I promise you, somebody doesn't want you to be registered, and you might have been purged from the voter file and you don't even know that. And then when you go to vote in November, you call Sister Linda and tell them they didn't let me vote, and that happened in 2016 with many of you. Go check your voter registration at the Empower Change booth. Make sure you're registered to vote. If you're not registered to vote, we will register you there. If you want to continue to follow the work that we do, if you want to be engaged in the campaigns that we work on, go to the letter M, empowerchange.org. Don't be in the dark. You got to be up to date. You will not be able to contribute to the work that any of us on the stage do if you don't even know what's happening around you and to the people that you care about. So vote, vote, vote. ISNA does not endorse any political candidates. But if you are in the state of Texas,
it's a really hard choice if you're in Texas. It's a really hard choice.
If you are a registered voter in the state of Texas, and you are not going to get up in November and vote against a religious zealot bigot who has won after our community for years,
Interesting.
if you are not going to vote against Ted Cruz, then I'm questioning your Islam in this moment. So November 6th, vote,
Is that a judgment?
vote, do everything that you can to get to those polls, because it is really important this year to do that. I told you in 2016 that if you didn't go to the polls, you were going to get a fascist. You didn't believe me. Now you have a fascist. So hopefully this time you say we better listen to Linda Sarsour this time, because the last time she was right, and now I know I'm going to be right again. So you better get to those polls on November 6th.
That's Linda's statement in her personal capacity. That is Linda Sarsour's statement in her personal capacity. It does not represent the opinions, ideas, or statements of ISNA. Okay, go ahead, Mujahid.
One of the things that we have to critically analyze is that keeping us insecure as Muslims has a lot to do, as a follow-up with what Linda's saying. When you look at demographic shift, I had the ability to produce a piece for Comcast here. There's a demographer, Dr. Stephen Kleinberg here at Rice University with the Kinder Institute. In his study of Houston, Texas alone, which he believes is a representation of what will happen in the rest of the nation, Latinos, South Asians, so many of the demographics that are shifting into a minority majority. He told me there is no force that can stop this, no matter what happens. And this was about 7 or 8 years ago that I was able to produce this piece. Now when I realize the way that things were framed regarding this fear-mongering that we had to experience from some of the candidates, Latinos were framed as criminals and Muslims were framed as terrorists. One day I mentioned to them on CNN when we were speaking about this, I said, as people, as human beings,
Yes.
we shouldn't allow anyone to let them govern us based on fear. Because whenever we buy into that narrative, we become irrational. And we go to the lowest level of our humanity, which is human survival. And at that point in time, we can see others as the other. And you begin to fragment with one another and you lose your humanity.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, when a group of people think they're better than another, violence kicks in.
Yeah.
This is a natural cycle.
Yeah.
So as Latinos and as Muslims, whenever we've been interviewed, they ask us, aren't you afraid? I mean, you're Latino and Muslim. You
got a target on your back.
You are the president's favorite person, literally, like combined in one.
And that's exactly what we respond to them. There's never been a time where we've been so relevant in the history of this country.
That's right.
Yes.
We are so relevant right now.
Yes.
And if it wasn't the case, you wouldn't be here asking these questions because we would not be as relevant. So let us explain to you who we are and that we don't allow anyone to govern us based on fear.
Yes.
Because the moment we do that, we will lose our humanity. And we respect people as human beings. And as soon as we begin to talk after that speaking point, the respect level that is given, it goes into the level of accepting you. Because in America, if you want to be accepted, you have to demand your respect.
Yes.
And if you respect yourself, others will come to respect you. So never, ever let anybody put you in the marginalized realm or second, citizen sort of framework. If you allow someone to do that to you, you will become apologetic and you will be subdued to whatever they think you should be. And Allah Azza wa Jal raised us to a whole nother standard. And we hope that we become the ambassadors to be able to bring this good and the solutions from our faith and our humanity to be able to impact other human beings in the highest state. And that's when people will see that we can be the best Americans, the best Latinos, the best Muslims, the best human beings.
Yes.
And this is what the example of the Prophet ﷺ was.
Demanding that respect. Go ahead, Imam.
I think it's very important for us also to understand that if we're talking about being unapologetically Muslim, that doesn't mean that the sphere of our work, activism, organizing, has to be exclusively focused on the Muslim community. I think it's very important for us to understand there is something that can stop us. And the formula is deportation and even stripping citizenship by changing naturalization laws, changing the law of the law of the land. If you're born here, you're a citizen. To other formulas, mass incarceration, deport Latinos, incarcerate African Americans, suppress the votes of everyone who might vote against the interests of the establishment, and divide us up. So as Muslims, we have to be working against mass incarceration, because in many states, some states, primarily in the South, up to a quarter of adult African-American males have been disenfranchised for life, based on laws that go back to the post-Civil War, post-Reconstruction era, when you had a proliferation of African-American elected officials. We have to be against these harsh, draconian deportation laws and policies. We have to be against any moves to change the Constitution. We talk about what's happening. Where's the uproar against making, identifying yourself as a citizen for the 2020 census, which is unprecedented. That's going to suppress the count of minorities, which is going to have implications, political implications. Where's the outroar? No one's talking about that stuff. So we have a lot of work to do that focuses primarily on other communities, but the benefit will also accrue to our community as a Muslim community.
Thank you.
Let me say something.
You wanted to say something, Mehdi.
I do.
You did.
I will say this. Linda mentioned the politics and the importance of voting. In 2016, Muslims were made central to a US election in a way that was never done before. And what was fascinating about 2016 was it wasn't just the Republicans who put our identity on the table. It was also the Democrats in some ways. Because you had Donald Trump, you remember, running his Islamophobic campaign. In the primaries, there was Ted Cruz, Rubio, they were all doing it. Muslims were the whipping boys. The Democrats came along, and you remember Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton at the DNC. Bill Clinton said, if you love America and you want to help us fight terrorism, then stay and fight. If you love America and you want to fight terrorism, it was conditional.
Yeah.
There was an assumption and a condition. Hillary came out in her speech and said, we can't be anti-Muslim. Muslims are the most important first line in the war against terrorism, right? So, well-meaning maybe, but Muslims were instrumentalized in horrifically bigoted ways by the Republicans and by rather stupid ways by the Democrats. I think coming into 2020, we have to remind ourselves, put aside policies, put aside everything else. Again, to quote, I think Dali had the best line on that. How are we here as equals? How are we here as equals? Are we here to play an instrumental role, to fight terrorism, or to just be your doctor, or be your taxi driver? Or are we here as equal human beings to play whatever the whole role we want to play? If we're going to be successful, we're going to be successful. If we're not going to be successful, we're not going to be successful. We're not jumping through hoops. We're not apologizing for our successes or our failures. And we're certainly not going to go stand in the shadows because we happen to be brown and Muslim, non-white. I mean, we mentioned at the start, you mentioned about other communities and the lessons. My biggest worry has always been that when it comes to other communities, you can learn lessons, but really we're on our own. We're forging our own journey here, because if you look at, for example, Catholic communities, JFK gave a speech, at least Catholic communities were white. Jewish communities were white. At least with African American communities, majority Christian, there was some bond. Remember, they went after Obama because he's a Muslim. They couldn't go after him because he was black. That would be racist. Right. So he was Muslim. Oh, but he went to a church. Oh, he's Muslim. For us, we're both a foreign religion in the eyes of many bigots, and many of us are non-white. And I think that requires a lot of thinking on our part about strategies, about energy, about activism. There will be different paths. But in 2020, I hope, when that next election comes around, you look at some of the energy at a grassroots level, you look at some of the Muslim candidates who've been running for office, winning, I do hope, to use Imam Zaid's line, that the paradigm is shifting. That we can now speak in a way that we want to speak without first prefacing it with an apology, without first adding, speaking as a moderate Muslim, without first adding, let me condemn 9/11 before we move any further. We can come out and say, you know what, I want to talk about Medicare for all. And not in the context of being Muslim.
Yes.
I want to come out and talk about what's happening in the Muslim majority world, but not because it's any worse than what's happening in other dictatorial parts of the world.
Yes.
So I think that's what has to change. I liked Imam Zaid's line very much about how there are people out there who want to hear from us. We need to seek them out and have those conversations on our terms, their terms, everyone's terms, as equals.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Just an addendum to Mahdi.
And then I got it closed, Linda.
Yes, I know. And then someone's going to come up and make a disclaimer that ISNA does not support any political candidates. They are a 501c3
That's
organization
right.
and are apolitical. I am very political. Can't help it. But ISNA's not. Addendum to what Mahdi was saying, but to your point about both Republicans and Democrats both being really problematic in the way in which they brought us to the table or brought us to the conversation, the addendum is that we had an opportunity to see what a real presidential campaign does when they do center Muslims, give Muslims platforms, allow us to discuss the issues that we want to talk about, and we have to give credit where it's due, and I'm going to give credit to my uncle, Bernie Sanders from the great state of Vermont. And it was a great opportunity for Muslims across the country and state after state where Bernie went, where at least on every stage across this country there was a Muslim, either a woman in hijab or a man in a kufi with a beard that stood up and either spoke on a stage or even introduced Bernie Sanders himself. I was given a very high position as a national surrogate for Bernie. And not only were we given a place in the campaign in a way that we haven't since probably the days of Jesse Jackson running for president, and even then it was very limited in the way in which some leaders were being presented in a public manner. But we also won primary states for like a person like Bernie Sanders. Michigan gave Bernie Sanders the biggest political upset in US history. So it's not just about us showing up and voting and all that stuff. It's understanding that we actually have huge political power in many states, including Florida and Michigan and Texas and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and Ohio and Nevada and all of the swing states. If just the Muslims went to the polls, we would be those swing voters in a state that is called a swing state. If the Muslims voted in those states, guess what? It wouldn't be a swing state anymore. It would be a state that would clearly go, not to say that Democrats are always better than the Republicans, but in our opinion, they are at least people we can hold accountable a little easier and at least have a conversation with. So just wanted to give credit to my Uncle Bernie.
Thank you for your personal statement. The statement that comes from your personal capacity is your personal opinion, Linda.
Can I make another personal statement?
Oh,
wouldn't it be cool?
God.
No names, no names.
This is getting
wouldn't
out
it
of
be
control.
Cool? Wouldn't it be cool? I'm a British, I can't even vote, so I'm taking a very neutral, analytical statement. Wouldn't it be cool if Muslims all voted for a Jewish candidate in 2020? Just saying. Without any endorsements, no names.
Thank you for your opinion again.
Analysis. That was an analysis, observation.
Is that what we call that?
What we're calling
It's a hypothetical,
You're
sir.
a lawyer, so you tell me.
You too.
I'm a journalist, I know nothing about the law.
You know a lot about the law. Okay, guys, can we get a resounding ovation for this amazing panel? This was the best.
So cool, we can't even see
Mujahid
these people.
Fletcher, Imam Zaid Shaker,
We can't even see you.
Linda Sarsour, Mehdi Hassan, Dalia Mugahed. I called her a thought-provoking thinker. I meant to say thought-provoking intellectual. That's what I meant to say.
Yasmin Al-Hadi, woo!
Come on. There are people who's standing. There are people who's standing. They love you.
The 55th Annual ISNA Convention. In God we trust.